Hey guys, what is going on? It is Preston here from the Legendarium. Welcome to episode number 13 of 30-Minute Author Interviews. Today our guest is Timothy C. Ward. He stops by and we're going to talk about his newest novel, Godsknife, Revolt, and we're also going to talk about his Sand Divers series, which is based in the world of Hugh Howey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the next 30 minutes with Timothy C. Ward. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. Thank you for joining us today, Timothy C. Ward.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So for those that don't know anything about you, why don't you kind of tell them who you are and what you do?
Well, let's see. I've been writing for about 8 years, seriously. I had a period after college where I thought, man, my life's been pretty boring in suburban Cleveland and Iowa. I don't really have adventures in my life to draw stories from. And so I moved to South Korea, taught English in college. I did spend a semester in Australia. So I've got a bio that says something like I've been broke, lost, and surfed with sharks on the other side of the world. But now I dream of greater adventures from my keyboard. So I bought a house. I live in Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa. Got a son who's almost 3 and a child on the way. I was the executive producer of Adventures in SciFi Publishing for almost a couple years. And so done a lot of podcasting, interviewed a lot of people, been in your spot. It's much easier to just sit here and let you ask me questions.
That's right. Kick back and relax.
Yep.
That's funny. So of all those places you've lived at, what was kind of your favorite one and why?
Man, to draw a comparison between Australia and South Korea, different periods of my life. Australia, I was a sophomore in college, had no budgeting skills. Worked as a dishwasher at Denny's real hard all summer, and then had to go there for 6 months without income. And I could have picked strawberries in their heat, but I never did. And so I actually went for spring break, took a trip to New Zealand, flew there somehow, that was okay. Started just going around to shops, buying little things, souvenirs that say New Zealand on them, and mittens and pop and whatever. And we checked my ATM, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what I thought I saw on the ATM, but when I went to my hostel that night and they said, your card's declined, I guess I had just been every time I swiped my card, I had been doing an overdraft fee. And finally they stopped it at like $900 over. And so I was in New Zealand, Queenstown, which is like the most beautiful place ever. It's near where they shot The Hobbit. And no income, no place to sleep that night. So, that was very much a learning experience for me.
Right.
And South Korea was also strange. Your boss says, okay, well, go out and get something to eat and come back. You're going to start working tomorrow. And so I walked around my little town and, ordered based on price, and tried to use like chopsticks to eat meat in a bowl of soup. And that was strange. So,
right. Oh, that's funny. So you said you haven't been writing too long. What kind of gave you the bug to start writing and trying to produce your own, or put out your own stories?
Well, actually I went to college to be an English professor, and, did a bunch of my writing courses. But just the maturity wasn't there. And to be self-disciplined, to get through the hard times where you don't really know what you're doing. So I came back from Korea and went into seminary, and about a year into that, one of my roommates showed me his science fiction shelf, and he had all the Dune prequels, all the Dune books, and he had a bunch of Orson Scott cards. So I read Ender's Game, and then I read all the Dune prequels, and he asked me to write a book with him, and kind of having that other person to brainstorm with reignited the fire, as well as reading those other books. And then that was kind of when podcasts were starting to be pretty popular. So listening to those and just the encouragement that you get from podcasts where you hear stories of authors who went from just having the inspiration to write, and, you know, they spent 7 to 10 years working on it, but in the half-hour interview, it sounds like it's pretty simple.
Right.
So from there, you know, I just joined some online writing groups and got started, did a NaNoWriMo, and within the year finished my first novel. And I don't know, I think I've written 6 books since. So,
which have you published the story that you wrote during that the little November writing or not contest, but the writing?
No, no, I've got a few novels that are in a box. that one's certainly one of them.
Right. So when I discovered you were putting out the short stories in your Scavenger Evolution book, the first book in your Sandiver series. What was it about that world that Hugh Howey created that drew you to wanting to write a story in that world?
The biggest thing, I think, is sand diving for buried cities. The idea of post-apocalyptic fiction for me is one of my favorites. But everything in post-apocalyptic fiction, you're on the surface and everything around you is visible. But with sand, you're on the surface and the past is a mystery, but it's under your feet. And these people have these suits that can, defy what shouldn't be, that they shouldn't be able to go down a mile into the sand and uncover these cities, and yet they do. And so there's a scene in his book that has a sand diver who's going after something after a catastrophe, and I asked him if I could write the story about who that was and what he was going after, and he was like, yeah, go for it. So I did. I wrote the novelette Red Sands, and then just kind of put out some feelers to see if people liked it, and decided to make a novel out of it.
Yeah, I remember kind of like a bunch of indie authors or people that discover the indie writing scene. It's because of Wool. I discovered Wool first, even though it's not the first. It's not the first Hugh Howey story I read. Sand is actually the first story by Hugh Howey that I read. I bought Wool, but never read it for a while. And I love Sand, the world that he created, and like you said, the technology that he has in that book. There were times I felt like I was being buried alive with some of those people, and I felt like I had sand in my mouth, which I guess I could have because I bought a signed book from him and he sprinkled sand in it from his beach. This was before he got his boat. So when you ordered the book from him, he actually put a little sand in the book. So I could have been choking on real sand, but yeah.
I don't think the goal is then to open it up and open your mouth.
That's right.
Whatever you want to do, Preston.
That's right. But that world was just such an incredible world. And so you had a pretty good response with it, I'm assuming, because you kept writing in it, and you put out then Scavenger's AI, and that just came out in paperback not too long ago. So for those that really don't know anything about your Sand Diver series, why don't you give them kind of a little book blurb without any spoilers about what it's about?
Sure. So this last week I was at Worldcon, and so I had my dealer's table, and you got to come up with that quick tagline because people they don't really want to stop. So I came up with this is 200 years after Jack Bauer died, and sand divers are searching for the cause of the apocalypse. So that's kind of the tagline that I've been using recently. It was inspired by, I just had my first child a few months before, and I thought, what would two parents do if they lost their infant? And so I came up with the father is a dive master and ever since they lost their child, he's become a recluse at the bar as a janitor, and he's off a job that he can't refuse. It leads to more or less, it's a story of the connection of him and his wife through their grief. And they go on an adventure. They discover the buried city of Danvar that is mentioned in Hugh's book. And what they discover there takes on kind of the feel of Alien, where, they go into this space, not sure what's going on. And then all of a sudden, what's been dormant is now active and terrifying.
You have also just recently released a brand new story in your own world that you created called Godsknife Revolt. Why don't you before we talk about it, give the little book blurb on that one?
So that one is an apocalyptic battle for godhood in the rift between Iowa and the abyss. The other tagline is a giant praying mantis invasion of Iowa. So it's got a handful of characters. There's, 5, I think, main characters that have point of views in there. And there's 3 magic systems: order, maker, and chaos. And there's a little bit of philosophy in there just based on human desires, how we try and resolve problems. Do we try and resolve problems through chaos, through order, or through faith? And so, I mentioned that I went to seminary, so I'm curious about what drives people, and I wanted to write a book that wasn't preachy. So I took out all of our world religions and I broke it down into just the basics of, what motivates people. And then, I had this girl that's a nursing prospect. She goes to Iowa State and winds up meeting a recruit for order, an order mage. And he, they kind of hit it off. And then all of a sudden his priestess unleashes her plague in an attempt to create an army of human hybrid cicada praying mantises. And then they take a trip through a chaos doctor's elevator into the abyss and search for the Godsknife to kill the god of the abyss. It's, I don't know. Have you ever read The Gunslinger?
I have not. I've heard of it. I have not read it, though.
So Stephen King, he's got this kind of a parallel world that's just weird. And that was kind of the inspiration for this book. Is I like to be a little bit different and a little bit scary. So there you go.
Gotcha. So you said that you tackled kind of a little bit of philosophy in it. Did you learn anything about yourself while you were writing this that maybe you didn't know before?
I'm sure I did. I mean, all the characters that I write about are a picture of either myself or someone that I know that I want to know deeper. Caroline, the main girl, she has lost both of her parents, and she's really struggling with their faith and this mythological world that they believed in. She didn't, and now it's full frontal and unforgiving. And so she's got to cope with being isolated and feeling alone. And, she wants to go on an adventure, and fate or God, or however you want to look at that, has just thrown a curveball that has made her life terrible. And so she has to react and find out, is she going to be a heroine, or is she going to be a bad, an antagonist, or is she going to just crumple and die? And so for me, being in her shoes as she goes through this, it makes you ask every day, how are you going to react? And are you going to stand up, or are you going to fall down, or are you going to turn into the dark and let that fire be fueled by your anger? So yeah, I hope that I'm learning through that.
So are any of the characters in the book, do all the characters have a little bit of you in them, or do you kind of identify with one character more than another?
I think every character has to have a part of you in it for it to seem authentic. And they're just more fun to write that way. If you can take an aspect of your personality and maybe blow it up a little bit and make it more prominent in a person. And then, you add in parts that are nothing like you, martial artists or doctors or, masochists.
Right.
I don't know. Somehow, I'm sure I'm also the bad guy in this story too. I heard someone say once that the bad guy is who you are if you didn't have anything holding you back. Yeah, it's all there from experience.
So speaking of, I guess, experience, let's kind of go back, I guess, to you growing up. Have you always written even when you were little, or is that something you discovered later on in life?
Yeah. Ninja Turtle comic books in kindergarten. And then I didn't really write for a long time until high school. And I started writing some poetry, philosophic poetry, as I was dealing with depression. And I took a creative writing class in high school and wrote about skateboarding mice in a house ruled by cats. And it was just kind of fun escape. I kind of went through a lot in high school, my parents getting divorced, and it was hard for me. I was more into music and skateboarding and stuff at that age. I had to grow up a little bit before I was willing to just sit down with my thoughts.
Is there any book or book series that just really inspired you to start writing?
Catcher in the Rye, I thought was pretty cool. My dad took me to a bookstore and was telling me about how this book was banned. And I could relate to the character and just the idea of someone who wrote a book that was banned. And then my dad told me that I should get it. And then I read it and it was kind of cool. I'm sure that inspired me to see if I could do the same. And, I listen to a lot of punk music and stuff, so I like to be a rebel. And so, yeah, I'm sure that was like a challenge to me. And, but also just, the stories I enjoyed, Dragonlance, Stephen King. And then, as I mentioned, my science fiction books. And it's amazing to come up with ideas that can be fleshed out through a story. It's certainly not easy, and there's definitely something magical about it.
Did you find it more difficult writing in Hugh Howey's world, or creating your own world like you did with Godsknife?
I think it's easier to write in someone else's world because they've done a lot more work in the preparation than you see on the page. The page is like the shorthand of the rules for their world. Mm-hmm. When you are creating your world, you can be just going off on a tangent and it makes no difference to your actual story. And I've lost, well, I don't know if I'd say lost, but I've spent a lot of time building worlds that never had stories. And so when I had Sand, I read it like 4 times, which was enjoyable. And, it was kind of fun. It was like a little book report where I would go through chapters and see, how he describes his sand diving technology, how he describes the cities, how he describes his boats and their clothes. And it was, as a reader loving to read, it was the most fun homework you could have. With your own world, you also just, I don't know, you spend a lot of time not knowing if it's going to work out. You got self-esteem issues or whatever, with writing in his world, I knew it worked out, and so I just had to follow what he was doing.
How long did it take you, I guess from when you got the initial idea for Godsknife, how long did it take from that initial idea until you actually published it?
2.5, maybe 3 years.
Oh, wow. Really?
Mm-hmm.
And so you said that the book's kind of the shorthand of all the work you had to do for the book. So does that mean you probably have like a couple boxes with outlines and drafts and all that stuff hidden away somewhere?
Electronically. Yeah, I've got crates of paper from my earlier drafts, and when I would print off drafts and do editing that way. But I went through probably 5 or 6, 7 drafts of Godsknife before what we see. It started off as a short story for a contest for Shock Totem magazine. They do some horror stuff, and I had this idea of an order mage who was retired and was pulled out of retirement, and there was just too much world building crammed into it, and so I had to flesh it out and change the characters and just kind of try and polish up the magic system.
You mentioned in there that there's mantises in your book. Why mantises? If that's right, is it mantises? Manti?
Yeah, mantises. Well, it's Iowa, and I didn't want to do zombies.
Right.
But I love, so, I get tired, Preston. I get tired. And when I'm reading, sometimes I just don't have enough brain stamina to handle epic fantasies or, hard science fiction where you're really straining to understand what they're saying, where the plot's going, who all these characters are. And there's just something about post-apocalyptic zombie fiction that's like, okay, you've got a family, the world has been flipped on its head, and now they need to run away. And so I kind of wanted to write that story, but I didn't want to do zombies because I'm like, well, why do I have to restrain myself to that? I've seen it done so much, and I still kind of do enjoy it, but what else can I do? And I'm like, well, man, if a praying mantis could fly at me, if a bunch of praying mantises dropped out of the clouds, that would be pretty terrifying. So
that's funny. So last time we had you on the blog, it was when we had our 10 questions with segment. And at that time, you were currently reading The Last Town by Blake Crouch. And at the time, you said that that's probably one of the best books you've read of the year. Of course, it was early in the year. Is that still your top book of 2016, or has that changed?
Oh, man. Let's see. Well, was it The Last Town? I was reading... Have I read 2 Blake Crouch books this year? I read Dark Matter since then. Have you read that?
I actually just bought it this past weekend. I have not read it yet, though. It's in my bag I carry with me.
I think that's number 1 for me this year really? So far. It's got quantum physics and parallel universe, but it doesn't feel like science fiction. It just kind of feels like portals. And he is astounding in how he makes you care for the reader or the hero, and this hero getting back to his family. Any book that makes me cry is remarkable, and this one it really shocked me how it did that. But also, there's never a letdown, and that's how I judge the best books. Is does it every time I pick it up excite me and make me want to keep reading? And that's really hard for me these days for a book to be consistent in that way, and his did.
Gotcha. Yeah, I went in there to pick it up, and I was also going to pick up the first book in the Wayward Pines series because I haven't read it. I haven't even watched all the television show. I think I'm still in season 1, but I wanted to read it. And when I went in the first bookstore, they didn't have any Blake Crouch at all. And then I went to another one. We were traveling, went to another one, and they had dark matter, but they didn't have anything else by them. I was like, how can you not have anything else? So that is definitely it's up there on my to read list. Like I said, I just picked it up this past weekend.
I would say hold off on the TV show. After reading the books, I was very disappointed. So I think people will enjoy the TV show, but if they've read the books, there's a whole character arc that isn't really in the show for them to fit it in 10 episodes. And man, that's such a good trilogy. That's the one trilogy where book 2 has far and above surpassed the first and third books in a trilogy.
Huh. Maybe I'll have to read them before I watch the movie or the show. We'll figure it out. Yeah, I'm kind of I'm looking forward to. I discovered an author this year. It was his debut novel. Sylvain Nouvel put out a story called Sleeping Giants. He's a published author, and it came out, I think it was in April, and that's my book of the year. Is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Nouvel, and the second book doesn't come out till April, and I think I read that book in maybe 24 hours. I got done, and it's the first book that when I got done reading, I just smiled. I was so happy with the way the whole story went, and now I got to wait a year for book 2. So I'm hoping book 2 is just as good or better than book 1, but we'll see.
You'll have to put the author's name and stuff in the show notes, because I'm not sure I would spell that correctly.
Will do.
I want to check it out. I'll
put it in the show notes, and I'll shoot you a message with it. I bought it when we were visiting my in-laws, and we have a 5-hour ride back. And this was one of those books that when I started reading it, I was like, okay, should I skip church with my in-laws and stay up late to read the book? I guess I should probably go to church. So I stayed up till 1 and read the book. And then I was like, we've got a 5-hour car ride back home. Maybe I should get the Audible while I'm at it too. And the Audible book, I haven't seen this done much. Of course, I'm just now getting into audiobooks as well. But each character in the book is voiced by a different voice actor. So it's real easy to follow along with if you like audiobooks. It's pretty good. So with your Godsknife book, is that going to be part of a series, or is that a standalone? And if it's going to be part of a series, how many books do you think will end up being in the series?
Well, it is at least going to be 2 books. This is my first book contract. It's with Evolve Publishing, and so it's a 2-book deal.
Okay.
So I'm at least going to write 2 books. The reason I made Scavenger AI the end of that series, it still could probably go if I wanted to, but I wanted to wrap it up. Was I wanted to hone my skills with concluding something, and also it's interesting when you think about the early career of an author. You've got that first series, and the first book. It was their first, well, maybe not their first written book, but their first published book. And so there's areas where it's a little rough. And if you keep writing in that series, you got to think how many people read that first book and thought, and they never made it to book 2. And meanwhile, this writer is on like book 7, and these people didn't make it to book 7 because they couldn't finish book 1. So for me, I'm trying to think, okay, I did my first series in 2 books. Now my third book is a fresh start. So, readers that are a little bit more, picky can, see something with more style. And so I don't know. I think I might be able to branch out more now that I'm starting with a little bit more polish. And Lane Diamond, the editor, is just phenomenal. So I would be very happy to make this a longer series. But we'll see. I mean, if that's the other thing as a writer, if a series is not selling, you gotta pick and choose how you spend your time and what books you write. So readers and reviewers will really help determine how much effort I put into the series and how far I go with it.
Gotcha. Well, here at the Legendarium, we like to end our interviews on a segment that we call the Legendary Ending. So these are just kind of some random questions. So nothing too serious here. What songs are currently on your writing playlist?
Oh, a lot of Trip Lee.
I was about to say, is it something sweet?
It's sweet. Yep. I like to bob my head a little bit while I'm writing. A lot of Tadashi and Trip Lee are probably my big two right now.
Yeah. Trip Lee's last two albums, was it The Good Life and is it Rise? Is his newest one? Those are two of the best albums out there. I can't get sick of those. Those are so good.
I'm certainly trying.
Yeah. If you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse, which one of your book characters that you created would you want to be stuck with, and why?
Oh man, probably Rush, well, I don't know. I think his wife does a better job of things. How can I do that without spoiling anything? So in my Scavenger series, I've got Poseidons, which are mech armor type suits that enhance the sand diving ability. And so, man, I would want to be next to one of those for sure.
Now, if you could pick any character from any media source, comics, books, movies, whatever, to be stuck in a zombie apocalypse with, who would you want?
I guess if I couldn't pick my family, I'd pick Bill Murray, just because he's hilarious and he reminds me of my dad. So
that's funny. If you had a time machine, where would you want to travel and why?
A time machine. I thought I want to write a zombie book just so that I can write the first line that says, "Man, life was so good when there were M&Ms." Because I would suck at life without all the little things, my Starbucks coffee and hot showers, fresh clothes. So I don't think I would do well going into the past. So I guess I would have to go into the future and see what it would be like in space.
See if they still have M&Ms.
But as long as they have M&Ms in space, otherwise I'm staying right here.
What flavor M&M's your favorite, or what type of M&M?
Peanut M&Ms.
Peanut, yeah, those are good. I don't know if I can move on from that. That's good. So, if you had one superpower that you could have, what superpower would you want and why?
Probably teleportation, because it takes too long to get places, and places are too far. I don't know if I'll ever get back to Korea or Australia or British Columbia to go snowboarding. So if I could teleport, it'd be sweet. It'd be sweet.
That'd be sweet. That's right. You teleport to get M&Ms quicker.
That might not be good on the whole diet. No exercise, teleport to M&M bowl. There's actually a place, speaking of M&Ms, I want to say it's 3 hours from where I live. I want to say it's somewhere in eastern Tennessee, where they have an M&M factory, but you cannot tour it. It's not open to public tours. I was so disappointed when I found that out. I want to say it's Cleveland, Tennessee, maybe. I've driven through it a couple times, but anyway, they do make M&Ms there, so mine might be fresher than yours, maybe. They made a factory of M&Ms without giving people the opportunity to bathe in them.
Yeah, I know, it's not fair.
That's bad. That's poor planning right there.
That is. And if you had to pick between Marvel or DC for the rest of your movies, television, comics, entertainment, which one would you choose and why? I don't really read a lot of comics, but I did grow up on Wolverine, so got to go Marvel. And for our famous question, a penguin walks through the door wearing a sombrero right now. What does he say and why is he here?
He was sent by my son, who's telling me that he's going to bed now, and Daddy, he wants a kiss from Daddy. So,
and before we leave, do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you'd like to share with our listeners?
If I could just encourage everybody to love, I would say that. For writers, just take it one thought at a time. And, whether it's brainstorming, writing your first draft, editing, there's always going to be more problems, but just focus on the one right in front of you and do your best. And you'll be surprised what you can do.
Sounds good. And where can our readers go if they want to learn more about you or your books?
TimothyCWard.com. And my books right now are on Amazon exclusively. I've got Scavenger Evolution is on Audible, and I'm working with a studio to produce AI and Godsknife, and we're hoping before Christmas to have those available. And I've got a signed paperback store through my website if you want to buy paperbacks. All my book pages have the drop-down link of direct from author, and I can sign those up for you, kind of like you've taken advantage of.
Yeah, I've gotten all of them so far, and I'll probably keep it up. Well, thank you for joining us today. We'll head on over to legendarium.com, check out the show notes. We'll put a link to your website and where they can get your books. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Preston. It's kind of you to bring me here. Doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thank you. I will try. Well, guys, that is all the time we've got for this episode. Thank you so much for stopping by and listening to 30-minute author interviews. I hope you come back next week when we'll have a brand new episode for you. Our guest is going to be Forbes West. And if you would, head on over to legendarium.com and check out all the different places you can subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Google Play, plus many others. And if you would, take the time and head over and rate and review the podcast. It would really help us out. And until next time, guys, have a good one, and remember to stay legendary. Hey guys, what's going on? Gotta re-record that.